much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I speak in this debate as someone who's extremely privileged to both serve in this Parliament and in the Scottish Parliament. So I'm able to bring some points of view which were not accurately articulated by the leader of the SNP, who is sadly leaving the chamber at the moment, because I think it is important, because I am referring to a number of the points he made. He speaks about the legal advice. We had the situation in the Scottish Parliament when the night before crucial amendments were being debated, Conservative MSPs, Labour MSPs and indeed SNP MSPs were written to by the Cabinet Secretary about their amendments and legal advice surrounding them, but were told that legal advice couldn't be shared. Yet here we have the UK Government sharing their statement of reasons with Parliament, and I think that's, well, it is based on legal advice, and I'm just showing the different approach by the government. It is based on legal advice. That was clear from the Scottish Secretary. And also, I think it is important to recall that although the SNP leader in this place and others have said this is a debate that has been raging in Scotland for over 6 years, that's absolutely correct. I've not yet heard, and I'm willing to take an intervention from any SNP member, that can explain to me why it had to be passed by December of last year. What was the rush in the lead up to Christmas that meant it had to go through the Scottish Parliament before the end of the year? I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
I'm delighted to just remind the honourable gentleman, and we've heard this a few times already today, that this is the opposite of rushed legislation. This has been in the works for 6 years. This has been a repeated manifesto commitment of a number of parties, and it has been the most consulted upon piece of legislation. You might more reasonably ask, why did it take as long as it did?
The point the Honourable Lady is missing is, yes, there has been that debate for 6 years. Why then did it have to go through stage 3 and looking at amendments until midnight one night and 1:30 in the morning for it to be rushed through before the end of the session? Surely, if there was that, I will give way in a moment, but surely, if there is that much debate, that much controversy, and remember, 150 amendments, if that legislation wasn't rushed, there wouldn't have been the need to look at 150 amendments. And I do yet wait to hear any SNP member saying why it had to be put through in December of last year. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Does he not recall that the debate in the Scottish Parliament went on till those hours and votes occurred at those hours because of his stalling?
It wasn't stalling, and indeed, well, I'm sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some people may say the 12 or 15 points of order we had earlier from SNP members was stalling. I don't believe that. I believe that was politicians making a point in Parliament. Just like in the Scottish Parliament, we were looking at 150 amendments because the SNP had rushed this through. And there's also been a lot made, and I'll give way to the right honourable gentleman.
I'm grateful to the honourable member. He raises the issue of 150 amendments. That's the point, because there was effective scrutiny that took place, and he, his colleagues and other parties put down these amendments, and they were looked at in the correct manner. And of course the Scottish Parliament had to take time to do that. Madam Deputy Speaker, we should be proud of that.
And I am. And that's why I wanted that debate. That's why I just make the point. Why couldn't we have continued that debate into the new year? What was the big issue that meant the SNP and the Greens were forcing this through by the end of the year? The last couple of points I want to make in the process in the Scottish Parliament is there's been a lot said, and the leader of the SNP refused to even acknowledge. But while there are members of all parties that supported this bill, there were a significant number of SNP opponents to the bill. SNP ministers resigned in Scotland as a result of this legislation. I'll give way in a moment. But what I would say is I gave my MSPs a free vote. I think that was right that they were given the opportunity. In fairness, one of our former colleagues in this place, Michelle Thompson, who's now an SNP MSP, spoke about the dark arts of the whips within her parties who were trying to stop debate. No, this was from Michelle Thompson. She used to be an SNP MP. She was speaking about the dark arts of her whips in this debate. And I'm just interested to know about the SNP MPs who oppose this legislation. I'm not sure if any of them are here today, but I'm sure the honourable gentleman will tell me that there are SNP MPs that oppose his government's Gender Recognition Reform Act.
Thank you for giving way. I don't beg to speak for the rest of my colleagues, and it is a matter for record that some SNP MSPs voted against the GRR. That did happen, but the point of democracy is it was the will of the Scottish Parliament as a whole, and it's the will of the Scottish Parliament that him and his government are trying to thwart.
No, we're not, and I'll come on to explain that in a moment. The last point I want to make is, again, the honourable gentleman who leads the SNP here spoke about this government taking a view on the Equality Act. I can only assume then, Madam Deputy Speaker, he is unaware of the letter to the SNP Minister who led this bill, Shona Robeson, from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, dated the 22nd of September last year, long before this bill came back to the Scottish Parliament, that said there was potential cross-border implications. Indeed, the Equality and Human Rights Commission said, in our view, there is an implication for the operation of the Equality Act 2020. This isn't the Conservatives or this UK government saying it. It is the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and they made that very clear to the Scottish Government and indeed to the SNP. I'm really sorry. I've now got 2 minutes left, so I apologise to the Honourable Lady. There is a lot I would like to get through here. I would have liked to have heard from the Liberal Democrat MP, because it does seem in both Holyrood and here, Liberal Democrat and Labour are supporting Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP on this. And I do worry that they are treating this issue in the same way they treated children and young people with the passing of the UN Convention on the Rights of Children bill. We were told then it was absolutely essential legislation. They then legislated under the competencies of the UK Government, and the UK Government took the Scottish Government to court. That was controversial at the time. Nicola Sturgeon said it was an absolute outrage. Yet, having heard the ruling from the Supreme Court on the 6th of October 2021, with the Supreme Court saying that legislation was flawed, it went back to the Scottish Government and it went back to the Scottish Parliament. What has happened since the 6th of October 2021? Well, I can tell you. On the 1st of February 2022, the Deputy First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, wrote to the Scottish Secretary and said they are looking to reintroduce this amended legislation to the Scottish Parliament. Given how important the UNCRC was to SNP members and the SNP government, can any SNP MP here today tell me when that bill will be introduced into the Scottish Parliament? I'll give way to the Honourable Lady if she can tell me.
I'm not sure whether he was aware, but over the last 2.5 years there was this thing called the COVID pandemic, which actually kept several governments fairly busy.
Not sure if the Honourable Lady perhaps hadn't heard me. I was saying there was a letter from the Deputy First Minister on the 6th of February 2022. So almost a year ago, we'd passed Omicron by then, and John Swinney was telling us that he would introduce that. This is another example, Deputy First Minister, of the SNP using legislation and vulnerable people to promote a battle between the UK and the Scottish Government. We can do far, far better than that.